r/relationship_advice. MIL called CPS on me, but my neighbor saved everything. Hashtag the knock on the door. The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was helping Emma with her spelling homework at the kitchen table. Mom, is accommodate spelled with 2 M's or 2 C's? My 6-year-old asked, her tongue poking out in concentration as she gripped her pencil like it might escape. 2 C's, baby. ACC, I started, but the knock interrupted me. Not a friendly knock. The kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain even registers what you're hearing. I glanced at the clock. 2:47 p.m. My 4-year-old, Lucas, was napping upstairs, and I'd just gotten Emma home from school an hour ago. I wasn't expecting anyone. My best friend Sarah wasn't supposed to come by until Thursday, and the delivery I'd ordered wasn't scheduled until tomorrow. 1 second, honey, I told Emma, squeezing her shoulder before heading to the front door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 women in business casual clothing. One held a folder. The other had an expression that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. My heart started hammering before I even opened the door. Yes? I said, cracking it open just enough to see them clearly but not wide enough to invite them in. Some instinct I didn't know I had kicked in. Are you Jessica Marion? The one with the folder asked. I am. Who's asking? I'm Patricia Chin with Child Protective Services. This is my colleague, Maria Rodriguez. We've received a report of potential child neglect and abuse at this residence. We'd like to speak with you and conduct a home inspection. The words hit me like a physical blow. Neglect. Abuse. The folder. The official badges hanging from their necks. There must be a mistake, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant, like it was coming from underwater. I don't know what report you're talking about, but there's nothing going on here. My children are safe. They're loved. We understand this is surprising, Maria said, her voice softer than Patricia's. But we have a legal obligation to investigate all reports. If everything is as you say, this should be straightforward. May we come in? My mind was racing. A report? Who would report me? I paid my bills on time, packed nutritious lunches, made sure the kids had doctor's appointments, read to them every night. Just this morning, I'd made Lucas's favorite pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Emma had done a project at school about her family, and her teacher had sent a note home saying it was heartwarming to see how much she loved her mommy. Of course, I heard myself say, stepping back. But I want to know who made this report. That information is confidential, Patricia said, stepping inside and immediately starting to scan the living room with analytical eyes. But we can discuss the specifics of the allegations once we've had a chance to look around. I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to breathe normally. My hands were shaking. The house was clean, the kids' toys were organized in the corner, dishes were done, there were no hazards I could see. But suddenly, everything felt like evidence against me. The slightly worn couch. The modest size of the living room. The fact that we lived in a 3-bedroom rental in a modest neighborhood instead of some sprawling suburban home. Let's start with the children's rooms, Patricia said, already moving toward the hallway. Emma is doing homework in the kitchen. Lucas is sleeping, I explained, following her. I need to make sure you don't wake him, he gets cranky and... We'll be careful, Maria assured me, but Patricia was already climbing the stairs like she owned the place. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking confused. Mom? Who are these people? My heart broke a little. She looked worried. Kids pick up on that stuff instantly, the panic in your voice, the way your body tenses. It's okay, sweetie. These are just people who wanted to say hello. Why don't you keep doing your homework? I'll be right back. I followed the CPS workers upstairs, my mind still spinning. A report. Someone had reported me. But who? And for what? Lucas's room was pristine. His walls were painted a soft blue with white clouds. He had a bookshelf with age-appropriate books, a toy box full of toys I'd carefully vetted for safety. His crib was up to current safety standards. I'd read the guidelines obsessively after becoming a single mother following my husband Michael's death 11 months ago. Oh God. Michael. Is this connected to his mother? The thought hit me with stunning clarity and horrible timing. Patricia was already opening drawers, checking under the bed, examining the closet. Maria was making notes on a tablet. The children are clearly well cared for, Maria said quietly. Patricia didn't respond, just moved to Emma's room with the same methodical intensity. Same process. Checking everything. Writing things down. I wanted to demand to know what she was writing, but I also knew that losing my temper would look bad. I'd read enough crime shows to know that. By the time we made it back downstairs, my legs felt weak. We'll need to speak with the children separately, Patricia said. Separately? They're 6 and 4. What are you going to ask them? Just some questions about their home life. It's routine. But it wasn't routine for me. It was terrifying. As I watched Patricia lead Emma to the dining room while Maria took Lucas, who'd shuffled downstairs, sleepy and confused, to the living room, one thought consumed me. Whatever this was, whoever had done this, I would not let them take my children. I just didn't know yet that someone had been watching. That someone had evidence. And that my nightmare was about to become their salvation, and my vindication. Hashtag the questions. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee I'd made an hour ago, listening to the muffled sound of Patricia asking Emma questions in the dining room. I couldn't hear the words, just the cadence of her voice, professional, neutral, but somehow still threatening. Maria was in the living room with Lucas. I could hear his little voice, high and uncertain, Mommy always makes me breakfast. My eyes burned. I didn't cry, though. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not while they were here, dissecting my life, my parenting, my home. The thing about CPS visits is that they're designed to make you feel guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. Every choice becomes suspect. Why is your child's room so minimalist? Why do you have baby gates at the stairs? Why aren't there sugary snacks in the pantry? Why is your schedule so regimented? The things you did right somehow become things they note down with that same clinical expression. Emma's voice drifted toward me, quieter now, and Mommy reads us stories every night. And she helps me with my homework. And she braids my hair even though it takes a long time. My throat tightened. She sounded scared. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Patricia and Maria reconvened in the kitchen with me. Emma had gone back to the table, coloring quietly, though her hands weren't steady. Lucas was watching a movie in the living room, something I'd normally limit, but desperation made the rules flexible. Based on our initial investigation, Patricia began, we haven't observed any obvious signs of neglect or abuse in the home environment. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I felt dizzy. However, she continued, and just like that, the relief evaporated. The allegations are specific enough that we'll need to conduct a more thorough investigation. We'll be speaking with the children's school, their pediatrician, and others in your life who can speak to the quality of care they receive. Of course. Speak to whoever you need to speak to, I said. I have nothing to hide. But I need to know, who made this report? Was it my mother-in-law? The question hung in the air between us. Patricia and Maria exchanged a glance. As I mentioned, that information is confidential, Patricia said. But I will tell you that the report included allegations of neglect, failure to provide adequate supervision, and concerns about the home environment being unsafe for young children. My stomach twisted. Those weren't generic accusations. Those were specific accusations. And they all painted a picture of me as negligent, as careless. As someone who didn't deserve her children. That's insane, I said, and I heard my voice crack slightly. My children are my entire world. Since my husband died, they're everything. I would never. We're not accusing you of anything, Maria interjected gently. We're just following protocol. These investigations are standard when a report is filed. But who files reports like this? I pressed. What kind of person makes up lies about a mother? Neither of them answered, which was answer enough. After they left, with a promise to follow up within 5 business days, I locked the door behind them and stood in my hallway, listening to the quiet sounds of my house. The hum of the refrigerator. Emma's crayon scratching against paper. The low murmur of the cartoon Lucas was watching. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Michael had left me with a small life insurance policy, enough to cover the mortgage for a year and put some away for emergencies. I'd never thought of needing a lawyer as an emergency, but here we were. Jennifer? It's Jessica Marion. Michael's wife. There was a pause. Then, Jessica, hi. I'm so sorry for your loss. Michael was a good man. What can I do for you? I told her everything. The knock on the door. The questions. The allegations. By the time I finished, I was shaking. Do you have any idea who filed the report? She asked. My mother-in-law, I'm almost certain. We don't get along. She's been difficult since Michael passed. She wanted custody of the kids, said I couldn't handle raising them alone. I told her no. She's been calling me, showing up at the house unannounced, making comments about how I dress, how I parent, everything. Has she made any threats? Any documented harassment? Not documented. She just calls, and when I don't answer, she leaves voicemails. They're usually passive-aggressive, things like just checking on the grandchildren, call me back, or I'm worried about how you're managing. Nothing outright threatening, just insinuation. Okay, Jennifer said. Here's what we're going to do. First, save every voicemail, every text, every communication with her. Document any in-person interactions, dates, times, what was said. If she shows up at your house again, don't let her in and call the police for a welfare check if you feel threatened. Second, get character references together, teachers, pediatrician, friends, anyone who can vouch for your parenting and your children's well-being. Third, we're going to file a preemptive restraining order against your mother-in-law if I think we have grounds. Can you do that? If we can establish a pattern of harassment, yes. But I'm going to need documentation. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I started going through my email, finding the messages from Michael's mother. Dozens of them. Some were innocuous, but many were barbed, comments about my weight, my job, my parenting choices. Asterisk, the children need stability. A 2-income household would be better for them. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm just concerned about Lucas's development. He seems shy. Maybe he needs more socialization. Asterisk. Asterisk, have you considered letting me take them for the summer? You probably need a break. Asterisk. Each one, individually, could be dismissed as a concerned grandmother. Together, they painted a picture of manipulation and passive-aggressive control. I heard a knock on the door and my entire body went rigid. My eyes snapped to the clock, 5:47 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor, Mr. Chen, the elderly man who lived 2 doors down. The one I waved at sometimes when I was getting the kids to the car. We'd never really spoken beyond pleasantries. Yes? I opened the door, confused. He was holding a folder, and his expression was serious in a way that made my exhausted brain immediately think of worse things than CPS visits. Ms. Marion, he said quietly. I think we need to talk. And I think you're going to want to listen to what I have to say. Hashtag what Mr. Chen knew. My first instinct was to close the door. I was tired, wrung out, and the last thing I needed was whatever neighborhood drama Mr. Chen was about to dump on me. But something in his eyes, a kind of careful urgency, made me hesitate. Can I come in? He asked. This isn't something we should discuss on the doorstep. I glanced behind him at the quiet street, at the dying light of late afternoon casting long shadows across the lawns. The neighborhood was empty. Still, something about his demeanor made me step aside. Mr. Chen was probably in his early 70s, the kind of neighbor who kept his yard immaculate and his social interactions minimal. I'd seen him out watering his plants, puttering in his garage, but we'd never had a real conversation. Now he was standing in my entryway, folder in hand, looking like he'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Emma, Lucas, can you give Mommy a few minutes? I called toward the living room, trying to keep my voice light. Keep watching your show, okay? They barely acknowledged me. I led Mr. Chen into the kitchen and gestured for him to sit at the table, the same table where CPS had just finished interrogating my parenting an hour ago. Before I say anything, he began, his voice careful, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you comes from a place of genuine concern for your children and for you. I've been a widower for 17 years. I know what it's like to lose a spouse, and I know what it's like to have people try to take advantage of that vulnerability. My stomach clenched. What are you talking about? He opened the folder slowly, and I saw pages of neat handwriting, photographs, and what looked like printouts of security camera footage. 2 months ago, Mr. Chin said, your mother-in-law came to your house. It was a Saturday afternoon. She was very upset. She was yelling on your porch. I could hear her from my house, and I was concerned for your safety. That's when I decided to do something I probably should have done immediately, but I wanted to be thorough first. What did you do? My voice came out as a whisper. I have security cameras on my property, he continued, adjusting his glasses as he spread out photographs. 3 of them. One covers my driveway, one covers my front entrance, and one covers the side of my house that faces your property. Over the past 2 months, I've documented every instance of your mother-in-law visiting, every instance of her attempting to contact you, and more importantly, I've documented your daily life with your children. I felt my face go pale. You've been watching me? I've been watching your mother-in-law watching you, he corrected gently. There's a difference. And I have documentation of what I believe is an intentional campaign of harassment designed to establish a pattern that could be used against you in some kind of custody dispute. He laid out more photographs. There was Patricia and Maria arriving this afternoon. There was the date and time stamped in the corner. There were photos from weeks ago showing Michael's mother, Patricia, standing on my porch, her face contorted with anger. There were images of her trying the doorknob, looking through windows. My God, I breathed. There's more, Mr. Chin said. He pulled out what looked like a journal. I've documented every day for the past 61 days. I've written down the times you take your children to school, the times you pick them up, the times you spend in the yard with them, the times I've observed you playing with them, reading to them, caring for them. I've noted their appearances, clean clothes, no visible injuries, appropriate behavior for their ages. I've documented 3 instances where your mother-in-law showed up unannounced, and in 2 of those instances, she became aggressive when you refused to let her in. My hands were shaking as I reached for the journal. The handwriting was meticulous, almost obsessive in its detail. Asterisk 2:15 p.m. Mother and daughter in front yard. Child drawing with sidewalk chalk. Mother supervising from porch, smiling. Both children appear happy and well-adjusted. Asterisk another entry. Asterisk 3:45 p.m. Mother preparing dinner. Children helping, standing on stool to reach counter. Supervised activity, age-appropriate task delegation. Asterisk. Mr. Chen, I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Relief? Violation? Gratitude mixed with a creeping sensation of being observed? I understand if you're uncomfortable, he said, reading my face. But I want you to understand why I did this. After my wife died, my daughter tried to convince me to move into assisted living. She thought I couldn't manage on my own. She made comments to my doctor, my neighbors, even tried to suggest to my lawyer that I was developing dementia. I had to fight to prove I was competent, that I was fine. I hated every minute of it. So when I started noticing the pattern of behavior from your mother-in-law, the frequency of her visits, the escalating tone, the way she'd watch your house when she thought no one was looking, I recognized it immediately. This is a woman building a case. A case for custody, I said numbly. Exactly. And I believe she called CPS today to try to manufacture evidence that you're unfit. The allegations she made had to come from her. They're too specific, too detailed. She knows your life intimately, which means she's been paying very close attention. I thought about all those voicemails, all those passive-aggressive emails. I thought about her comments about my weight, my job, my ability to parent. She'd been gathering ammunition all along. Why didn't you come to me before now? I asked. Why wait until after CPS showed up? Because I wanted to make sure I had enough documentation to be taken seriously, Mr. Chen said. 1 or 2 instances could be dismissed as the concern of a grandmother. But 61 days of documented behavior, photographs, timestamps, that tells a story. That shows obsession. That shows a pattern of harassment. He slid another folder across the table. This is a copy for you. Everything is dated, everything is backed up. I have digital files on a thumb drive as well. He produced a small red drive from his pocket. Your lawyer is going to want this. My lawyer. Jennifer. The restraining order. If I may be so bold, Mr. Chin said carefully, I'd suggest you give this to her immediately. Before your mother-in-law escalates further. And I'd suggest you let her know that if she continues any contact with you or your children, there will be consequences. Legal ones, backed by evidence. After he left, refusing my offer of coffee, saying only that he was glad he could help, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by documentation of my own life. 61 days of evidence that I was exactly the kind of mother I'd always believed I was, attentive, loving, capable. But as I read through Mr. Chen's meticulous notes, I also felt the weight of something else settling over me. Someone had been watching. Even if his intentions were good, even if his documentation might save me, the simple fact remained, I hadn't been alone. My children hadn't been alone. For over 2 months, we'd been under surveillance. And the worst part? I was grateful for it. Chunk 4. The drive to Jennifer's office the next morning felt like the longest 15 minutes of my life. Mr. Chen's red thumb drive was in my purse, along with the printed copies of his documentation. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs, those timestamps, that meticulous handwriting cataloging my existence. Emma and Lucas were at school. I dropped them off with extra hugs this morning, feeling the weight of how close I'd come to losing them. The CPS investigator's questions from yesterday kept replaying in my mind. She'd been professional, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the way her pen paused over her notebook when she asked about my work schedule, my childcare arrangements, my mental state following Michael's death. Jennifer's office was on the 4th floor of a downtown building that smelled like old carpet and coffee. Her assistant waved me straight through. Apparently I'd been expected. Jennifer herself was already on her feet when I entered, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance. I probably looked as exhausted as I felt. You sounded stressed on the phone, she said, gesturing for me to sit. What's happened? I laid out the folders on her desk. I explained Mr. Chen, who he was, what he'd done, why he'd done it. I watched Jennifer's expression shift from concern to intrigue to something darker as she flipped through the photographs and read his journal entries. "This is extraordinary," she said finally, holding up one of the printed security camera stills. It showed Patricia on my porch, her hand on the doorknob, her face twisted in anger. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks ago. "This is exactly what we need. This establishes a clear pattern of harassment," I finished. "I know. But Jennifer, there's something else." I hesitated, because saying it out loud made it feel more real. He was watching me too. Not just Patricia. He documented everything I did. Every day for 2 months. Jennifer set the photograph down carefully. "And how does that make you feel?" "Violated," I said immediately. "Grateful. Terrified. All of it at once." She nodded slowly, leaning back in her chair. "That's understandable. But I want you to understand something. What Mr. Chen has given you here is a weapon. A legal weapon that might end this situation permanently." She tapped the journal. "He's done what would have taken me months and significant money to accomplish through discovery. He's documented your competence as a parent, and he's documented your mother-in-law's obsessive behavior. This changes everything about our position." "So this helps?" I asked. "This more than helps. This potentially wins." She picked up her phone and pressed an extension. "Margaret, can you scan all of these documents into the system? And get me copies made, 3 sets." She hung up and turned back to me. "Here's what happens next. We file for the restraining order against Patricia, and we include all of this as supporting evidence. We also formally notify CPS that their allegations are baseless and provide them with documentation of your parenting. And then..." She trailed off, and something in her expression made my stomach tighten. "Then what?" I prompted. "Then we wait to see how Patricia responds. Because she's going to be very angry when she finds out that not only did her plan fail, but the evidence against her is so extensive that she's now looking at a restraining order and possibly other legal consequences. Angry people are unpredictable people." I thought about Patricia, about the way her voice had sounded on my voicemail when I'd missed one of her calls last week. Not concerned. Furious. Like I'd wronged her somehow by refusing to hand my children over to her. "You think she'll escalate," I said. "I think," Jennifer said carefully, "that we need to be prepared for the possibility." "Have you thought about what you'll do if she doesn't accept the restraining order? If she continues to contact you?" "I'll call the police," I said. "I'll document it. Like Mr. Chen did." "Good. And I want you to consider installing your own security system. Not to watch your neighbor," she added, catching my look, "but to protect yourself and your children. If Patricia does try to violate the restraining order, you'll want video evidence." I thought about the irony of that. Installing cameras myself because my neighbor's surveillance had been such a comfort. "There's something else," Jennifer continued. She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer, not one I'd brought. "I've been looking into Patricia's background. Michael mentioned a few things over the years, but I wanted to verify. She's been involved in 3 previous custody disputes. Once with your husband's father when Michael was young, she lost that one. Once with Michael's ex-girlfriend regarding a child we didn't know about." My head snapped up. "Yes, Michael has an older half-sister from a relationship before you met. Patricia tried to get custody when the mother wanted to relocate. And then once with your in-laws after your father-in-law passed away." "She's a serial custody fighter," I whispered. "She's a woman who uses the legal system as a weapon," Jennifer said bluntly. "And she's gotten better at it with each attempt. Mr. Chen's documentation suggests this time she was being much more methodical. She wasn't just going to fight, she was going to build a case over time." My phone buzzed. A text from the school, *, "Please call us when you have a chance. Nothing is wrong, but we have a question about pickup arrangements, *. "Excuse me," I said to Jennifer, my heart already racing. I called the school immediately. "Hi, Mrs. Hayes," the receptionist said warmly. "We just had a call from Patricia Harwell asking about her granddaughter's allergies and whether she was authorized for afternoon pickup. We didn't provide any information, of course, but I wanted to let you know she was asking. She seemed to think she might be picking up both children today." Ice flooded my veins. "No. Absolutely not. She is not authorized for pickup. At all. Under any circumstances." "We figured, but I wanted to confirm. We have your file marked that pickup is authorized only for you, and we have your cell phone as the emergency contact." After I hung up, Jennifer was watching me with concern. "What happened?" "She called the school," I said. "She's trying to establish a relationship with him. Trying to find out information about my children. Jennifer, she's not stopping. The CPS call didn't scare her, it's just made her try a different approach." Jennifer's jaw tightened. "All right. Change of plans. We're filing the restraining order today. I'm also going to contact the school and provide them with a copy of it, so they know to deny her any contact or information. And you need to talk to Mr. Chen." "About what?" "About whether his security cameras caught this. Whether there's footage of her calling your school, trying to present herself as someone with pickup authority. If there is, it's additional evidence of her attempts to manipulate the situation." As I drove toward Mr. Chen's house after leaving Jennifer's office, I realized something terrifying. The game wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And now Patricia knew that I had evidence against her. I had no idea what she'd do next. #Chunk5. Mr. Chen's house looked exactly as it always did, the garden impeccable, the porch swept clean, the windows gleaming in the afternoon light. But now I saw it differently. Behind those windows was a man who'd been watching my life unfold, documenting my every move, my parenting choices, my grief. I'd invited him to lunch twice since Michael died. Had he been filming then too? I sat in my car for a long moment before ringing the doorbell, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. He answered almost immediately, as if he'd been expecting me. Maybe he had been. The man had documented my schedule down to the minute. "Miss Hayes," he said warmly. Come in, come in. I was just making tea." His living room was exactly as I remembered, comfortable, lived in, with photographs of what I assumed were his late wife and children scattered across shelves and side tables. Everything about him screamed harmless elderly neighbor. Except for the fact that he'd been running what amounted to a private surveillance operation on my home. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. He gestured for me to sit, moving into the kitchen. I followed him, unwilling to settle until we'd talked. He prepared the tea with deliberate slowness, heating water, steeping leaves, finding cups. It felt like a delay tactic, though maybe I was projecting. When you installed your security cameras, I began carefully, how much of my property do they actually see? He turned to face me fully then, his expression serious in a way it hadn't been before. All of it, he said simply. The front porch, the driveway, the side yard where the children play, the back patio. Every entrance. Every exit. For 2 months? Yes. And you've been watching me. Emma and Lucas. Everything we do. Yes, he said again, and there was no apology in his voice, which somehow made it worse. Every day. I wanted to feel violated. Part of me did. But another part, the part that had almost lost her children that morning, couldn't quite manage it. My lawyer wants to know if your cameras captured Patricia calling the school today. Mr. Chen's eyes sharpened. The school? When? I checked my phone. Around 2 p.m. She called asking about my daughter's allergies, trying to find out about pickup authorization. He moved to a small desk in the corner of his kitchen and opened a laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, and I realized this wasn't his first time reviewing the footage. How many times had he sat here, watching my life play out on a screen? Patricia visited your house at 1:47 p.m., he said, scanning through something. She stayed on your porch for approximately 8 minutes. She looked angry. Then she left, and approximately 10 minutes later. He turned the screen to show me his own phone's caller ID log. A call from your school district came through on my landline. She must have used your phone number as it was visible from your voicemail greeting. Wait. She used her phone to call the school? No, he said, turning the laptop back. I think she used her own phone. But I can show you the footage of her on your porch. She was making a phone call while she stood there. I suspected it was you at the time, but... He trailed off and typed something new. Here. I have 13 previous visits from her documented. This is the first time she's made a phone call while on the property. The screen showed footage from an external camera mounted on what must have been his fence line. The angle was perfect. I could see Patricia on my porch, phone to her ear, her body language aggressive and tense. The timestamp read 1:54 p.m. 14 minutes before the school called me. She stood there for 6 minutes on that call, Mr. Chen said quietly. Then she left. I felt my stomach twist. She'd been there. At my house. Today. While my children were at school. While I was at my lawyer's office. And she'd called the school from my own property, which felt violating in a way I couldn't quite articulate. There's something else you should know, Mr. Chen continued. He typed something and pulled up a different date. 3 days ago. She came here around 8 p.m. The children were already asleep. What? I moved closer to the screen. She walked around your property. The back, primarily. She looked at the windows. She tried the gate to the backyard, it was locked, so she couldn't get through. She stood there for almost 15 minutes, looking at your house. My mouth had gone dry. You didn't mention this before. I wasn't sure if it was relevant, he said, and I heard the defensiveness creep into his tone. It was dark. She was just looking. She didn't break anything or attempt to enter. I thought perhaps she was grieving, wanting to feel close to her son's home. She's not grieving, I said flatly. She's surveilling me. The same way you've been surveilling me. There was a long silence. Mr. Chen set down his teacup with careful precision. That's different, he said finally. Is it? I watched to protect you. To document the truth. And what was she doing? I demanded. What do you think Patricia was doing looking at my house in the dark, checking my gates, gathering information about my children's allergies? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. I pulled out my phone and called Jennifer. She answered on the second ring. He has footage, I said without preamble. Of Patricia on my property today at 1:54 p.m. Making a phone call. And footage from 3 days ago of her surveilling the house after dark. Checking the gates. Send me everything he has, Jennifer said, and her voice had taken on that steely edge I was beginning to recognize. All of it. Every date, every timestamp. We need to amend the restraining order request to include trespassing and stalking language. And get her something in writing, an email or text confirmation, about accessing your property without permission. After I hung up, Mr. Chen was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret? Resignation? I should have told you, he said quietly. Yes. You should have. I was afraid if I told you that Patricia was escalating, you would panic. That it would affect you more, knowing you were being watched. I was already being watched, I said. By both of you. He flinched at that. Good. My lawyer needs everything, I continued. Every recording, every photograph, every timestamp. Not just about Patricia. About me too. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with here, how much you've documented, what you've seen, all of it. If I'm going to use this against Patricia, I need to know exactly how far this goes. Mr. Chen nodded slowly, and I saw the weight of his decision finally hit him. His documentation had started as protection. But now it had become something more complicated. A window into everything. A mirror that showed not just Patricia's obsession, but the fine line between watching over someone and watching someone. And I had no idea what I'd find if I pulled back the curtain completely. #chunk6. Mr. Chen spent the next 3 hours transferring files to an encrypted external drive. I sat at his kitchen table, watching him work with the methodical precision of someone who'd clearly done this before, and tried not to think about what that meant. The tea had gone cold. Neither of us bothered to refresh it. I started the cameras after the first time she showed up at your house uninvited, he explained as he worked, his fingers moving between the laptop and various folders on his desk. Do you remember? About a week after Michael's funeral? She came to the door demanding to take the children for the weekend, and when you said no, she became difficult. I did remember. I'd mentioned it to him in passing one morning while taking out the trash, a casual complaint to a friendly neighbor. I hadn't thought twice about it. You installed security cameras because of one argument? Not just one, he said, not looking up from the screen. The pattern. The way she'd appear without warning. The things she'd say to you through the door. The way she'd circle the house, checking windows. He finally turned to face me. I've lived alone for 16 years, Miss Hayes. After my wife died, I learned to notice when people are hunting for something. The phrasing made my skin crawl. Hunting? For leverage, he said simply. For proof. For ammunition. For whatever could give them power. He turned back to the laptop. Your mother-in-law is very good at it. Over the next hour, Mr. Chen walked me through what he documented. Not just the recent visits, but months of them. Going back further than I'd even realized Patricia had been coming around. There were timestamps from early morning drives past the house where she'd slow down but not stop. Evening visits where she'd park across the street and sit in her car, watching. One incident from 6 weeks ago where she'd apparently come to the door at 10 p.m., claiming she'd left her engagement ring at Michael's house and desperately needed to search for it. You didn't tell me about that, I said, my voice tight. She left peacefully when you didn't answer, Mr. Chen said. And you weren't home. I could see her through my window, waiting. She never attempted to force her way in. I considered it part of the pattern of her behavior, not an immediate threat. You get to decide what's an immediate threat. He flinched but didn't respond. The files kept multiplying on the drive. Photos of my children playing in the yard, dozens of them, timestamped and organized by date. Videos of me arriving home from work, pulling groceries from the car, sitting on the back patio with a glass of wine after the kids were asleep. There was footage of me crying on the front steps one night. I remembered that night, the 3rd anniversary of my father's death, which had hit harder this year because Michael was gone, and I felt something bitter and complicated twist in my chest. These aren't evidence against Patricia, I said quietly. These are invasive. Mr. Chen, these are evidence that you're protecting you, he said firmly. Everything in here proves that you're a good mother. That you care for your children. That you grieve but you don't neglect. That I'm unaware I'm being watched, I finished. That's what these prove. He set down his hands, and I saw them trembling slightly. I'm 73 years old, he said. I watched my wife die slowly. I watched my children build lives in other cities and visit me twice a year, maybe. I watched this neighborhood change, become more transient, less safe. And then you moved in with 2 young children and a husband I rarely saw, and I recognized something in you. Fragility. Someone struggling. And I thought, he stopped, swallowed hard. I thought if I watched, if I documented, if I was vigilant, maybe I could prevent something terrible from happening. By deciding what terrible looks like? By gathering facts, he said. Facts are objective. Facts without context are just surveillance, I said. But even as I said it, I knew I was going to use them. I was going to take these files to Jennifer, and she was going to use my neighbor's months of documentation to build a case against Patricia. The irony made me feel sick. My phone buzzed. A text from the daycare provider, ** Lucas had a small accident this afternoon. He's fine, just wanted to let you know. Change of clothes used **. My heart rate spiked immediately. An accident. Wasn't that one of the things Patricia had implied during the CPS call? That the children weren't being properly supervised, that accidents happened because I wasn't watching carefully enough? What's wrong? Mr. Chen asked. The daycare, I said, already pulling up their number. One of my kids had an accident. I called and spoke to Mrs. Rodriguez, the daycare director, a woman I'd known for 2 years and trusted completely. Lucas had spilled juice on himself during snack time, just juice, nothing serious, nothing unusual. Mrs. Rodriguez had been in the room. He'd reached for the cup and knocked it over. A completely normal toddler incident. We change them all the time, she assured me. This is nothing. But as I hung up, I felt the paranoia settle into my chest like a stone. Had Patricia somehow orchestrated this? No, that was insane. But what if the CPS investigator called the daycare? What if they asked about accidents? What if everything, every spilled juice, every scraped knee, every normal childhood incident, became evidence that I was a bad mother? Miss Hayes? Mr. Chen was watching me with something like concern. Is the child hurt? No, I said. No, he's fine. He just spilled juice. I looked at Mr. Chen, at his kitchen filled with surveillance equipment and organized files, at the external drive he was still preparing. I need you to send me everything you have. Not just about Patricia. About everything. Every time my children have been outside. Every time someone came to the door. Every delivery, every visitor, every normal moment of our lives. I need to know what ammunition Patricia could potentially use against me. I'll send it all, he said quietly. But Miss Hayes. And then, I continued, I think you need to consider stopping. Whatever protection you thought you were providing, I need to know that you're no longer watching me. Because if there's a custody battle, if this gets ugly, and a judge finds out that my neighbor has months of video footage of my children without my consent, that's not going to help me. That's going to make me look like someone who doesn't understand boundaries. Who allows inappropriate surveillance of her children. I would never. I know you wouldn't, I said, and I meant it. But intentions don't matter in court. Only facts matter. And right now, the fact is that you have documented my entire life without my knowledge. He handed me the external drive, and I felt the weight of it in my palm, literally the weight of months of surveillance, reduced to a small piece of plastic and circuitry. Inside it was everything I needed to stop Patricia. Everything I needed was also evidence of how much I'd been watched. The line between protection and violation, I was learning, was much thinner than I'd ever realized. #Chunk7. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though I'd driven this route 1,000 times. The external drive sat on my passenger seat, and I found myself glancing at it every few seconds like it might explode. Which was ridiculous. It was just a drive. Just data. Just the digital equivalent of a loaded gun I'd just agreed to carry into court. I picked up the kids from daycare, and Lucas seemed fine, completely fine, no lingering trauma from his juice incident. He chattered about the finger painting he'd done, an abstract masterpiece that was mostly blue and one enthusiastic smear of purple. I made appropriate mother sounds while my mind spun through the implications of what I'd just done. What I'd just agreed to do. Jennifer called me at 6:47 p.m., before I'd even started dinner. I heard from CPS, she said without preamble. The investigator, Ms. Torres, is requesting additional interviews. She wants to speak with your daycare provider, your pediatrician, and she's asking about any disciplinary incidents at the children's school. My stomach dropped. Lucas doesn't go to school yet. He's at daycare. I know. But she seems to be compiling a comprehensive behavioral picture. It's actually good, I think. More thorough means more opportunity to demonstrate the children's well-being. But I wanted to give you a heads up. She'll be calling Mrs. Rodriguez directly, probably tomorrow or the next day. She'll ask about accidents, I said. Jennifer paused. What kind of accidents? Lucas spilled juice on himself at daycare today. Mrs. Rodriguez sent me a text. And I started thinking about all the ways that could be framed as neglect or poor supervision, and... Stop, Jennifer said, not unkindly. One juice spill isn't going to sink you. Children spill things. The daycare director will confirm that. This is normal. But her reassurance didn't settle my anxiety. It just shifted it into a different shape. Because now I was thinking about something else entirely. The external drive on my passenger seat contained months of video footage of my children. Video that would show, indisputably, that they were being watched. And while Mr. Chen had never intended any harm, the footage could be interpreted as evidence that their environment wasn't secure, that they were being observed by strangers, that I created a situation where hidden cameras were monitoring their daily lives. Jennifer, I have something else I need to talk to you about, I said carefully. But I can't do it over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Of course. My office, 2 p.m.? I confirmed and hung up, then immediately called my mother. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the background noise of a restaurant. She was out with friends, probably the book club she joined after Dad died. But she didn't hesitate to excuse herself. Sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound stressed. Everything felt too big to explain over the phone, so I gave her the abbreviated version. CPS was being thorough, there would be more interviews, and I'd obtained some evidence that might help or might hurt, depending on how a judge looked at it. What kind of evidence? She asked. I'll explain tomorrow, I said. But Mom, I need to ask you something. If this goes to a hearing, if Patricia pushes for custody or even supervised visitation, would you be willing to testify for me? To talk about the kind of mother I am? There was a brief silence. Of course I would. You know that. Even if it gets ugly? Even if she brings up things about my marriage to Michael, about my grief, about things that might make me look unstable? You're not unstable, my mother said firmly. You're a woman who lost her husband and is fighting to keep her children. If that's not stable, I don't know what is. After we hung up, I made pasta for dinner, the kids' favorite, carbs and butter and a little bit of cheese, the kind of meal that's nutritionally adequate but feels like comfort. I watched them eat, Lucas with his characteristic messiness, Sophie with her careful deliberation about which noodles to eat first. Normal children. Happy children. Children who were thriving despite the chaos surrounding their mother. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Mrs. Rodriguez from Sunny Days Daycare. I heard from CPS investigator today asking about your children's behavior and safety. Wanted to let you know she asked some specific questions about supervision and incident reporting. I told her everything was normal and appropriate. You have nothing to worry about. Relief flooded through me. At least that was one interview Mrs. Rodriguez would pass with flying colors. She'd been nothing but supportive, and her statement would corroborate my fitness as a parent. But then another text came through, this one from an actual contact, Patricia. My mother-in-law. My heart rate spiked immediately. I heard the investigator spoke to some people. I want you to know I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect Michael's children. If you're struggling, there's no shame in getting help. I'm still willing to take them for extended visits while you get yourself together. We can do this amicably. I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to my mother when she arrived to help put the kids to bed. She'd asked to come over, to be present. She read it twice, her expression hardening. That's manipulation, she said flatly. That's her trying to make it look like she's the reasonable one while subtly implying you're unfit. I know, I said. But it's also dangerous because it will look reasonable to someone reading the context, especially if she's claiming she was just offering help. I didn't respond to Patricia. Jennifer had been clear about that, no direct communication without her present. Later, after my mother left and the children were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the external drive in front of me. I opened my laptop and inserted it, then scrolled through the files again. There was footage of me laughing with Sophie on the back porch. There was video of me cleaning up after meals with Lucas, wiping his hands, making sure he drank water. There was evidence of every single thing a good mother does, all documented without her knowledge by a man who genuinely believed he was protecting her. The irony was suffocating. I copied everything onto my laptop, then organized it into folders labeled by date, by incident, by subject. I created a narrative document that laid out the timeline of Patricia's visits, her escalating behavior, her apparent surveillance of the house. By the time I finished, it was 1:47 a.m. and I had a comprehensive dossier on my mother-in-law's harassment that would make any judge pause. I also had undeniable evidence that my elderly neighbor had been running surveillance on my home for months. Evidence that would either save me or destroy me, depending on how the court chose to see it. #Chunk 8. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to Michael's funeral. It felt appropriate, like I was dressing for another kind of goodbye. Jennifer had advised me to look put together but not wealthy, competent but not cold. The suit hit all those marks. My mother sat beside me in the courthouse waiting area, her hand gripping mine hard enough to cut off circulation. You're going to be fine, she whispered for the 100th time. I wasn't fine. I was a woman about to present months of secret surveillance footage as my defense while simultaneously explaining that my neighbor had been documenting my life without consent. The optics were a nightmare no matter how we framed it. Patricia arrived 20 minutes before the hearing, flanked by her own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a burgundy suit who looked like she'd argued cases before breakfast. Patricia's eyes found mine across the hallway, and I saw something in them that made my stomach twist, not anger or malice, but desperation. She genuinely believed she was saving her grandchildren. That made her more dangerous, not less. All rise, the bailiff called, and we filed into Judge Margaret Chen's courtroom. The judge was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She reviewed the case summary without looking at any of us. This is a petition for emergency protective custody filed by Patricia Summers, grandmother to Sophie and Lucas Winters, ages 4 and 2 respectively. The petition was initiated following a report to Child Protective Services. Before we proceed, I want to be clear, the burden of proof here is high. Removal of children from a parent requires evidence of substantial risk of harm. Ms. Summers, do you understand? Patricia's lawyer nodded. We do, Your Honor. What followed was theater of the cruelest kind. Patricia's lawyer presented their case methodically, the spilled juice incident, presented as evidence of inadequate supervision. A comment from someone at the grocery store about the children looking disheveled. An anecdote about Sophie having a minor skin rash that Patricia suggested indicated neglect. It was all so thin, so obviously grasping, that I watched Judge Chen's expression grow increasingly skeptical. Then came Jennifer's moment. Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts these allegations, Jennifer said, standing. Evidence that not only demonstrates my client's exemplary parenting but also establishes a pattern of harassment by the petitioner. Patricia's lawyer stiffened. Jennifer presented the CPS investigator's preliminary findings first. Ms. Torres had completed her report, and it was unequivocal. No evidence of neglect, no evidence of abuse, no safety concerns whatsoever. The children were thriving. The home was clean and safe. The mother was attentive, responsive, and deeply committed to her children's well-being. That alone should have ended it. But Jennifer wasn't done. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have documentation of the petitioner's escalating attempts to undermine my client's custody through harassment, unannounced visits, and implied threats regarding the children's well-being. She presented Patricia's text messages, every one that implied my fitness was in question, every offer of extended visits, every veiled suggestion that I was unstable. The judge read them carefully, her expression hardening slightly. Your Honor, Patricia's lawyer interjected, these are simply a grandmother expressing concern for her grandchildren's welfare. Let me finish, Jennifer said coolly. We also have testimony from my client's neighbor, Mr. Daniel Chen, a retired educator and longtime resident of the community, who has documented the petitioner's concerning behavior over the past 4 months. Mr. Chen took the stand. I watched him cross the room with careful steps, swear the oath, settle into the witness chair. He looked tired and nervous and completely genuine. Mr. Chen, Jennifer began gently, you live next to my client? I do. For 3 years now. And have you observed interactions between the petitioner and my client? Yes. Several concerning visits. The petitioner has arrived unannounced, sometimes multiple times per week. There have been raised voices. The petitioner has made comments to neighbors that were critical of my client's parenting. Jennifer walked him through specific dates, specific incidents. She was building a narrative of a vindictive woman looking for ammunition against her daughter-in-law. It was damning. Then Jennifer presented the surveillance footage. I held my breath. Mr. Chen, you mentioned you documented these visits. Can you explain what you're showing us? Mr. Chen looked directly at me, an apology in his eyes, before answering. I installed a security system to monitor my own property, he said carefully. But the cameras have a wider view than just my house. They capture the street, the neighbor's driveway, some of her porch. When I noticed the pattern of visits becoming more frequent and more confrontational, I reviewed the footage to create an objective record of when the petitioner was visiting and how those visits progressed. Patricia's lawyer was on her feet. Your Honor, this is surveillance of my client's private interactions. I recorded visits to my client's home, not to my client's home, Jennifer corrected. The footage shows the petitioner's behavior on the street and the driveway. It's admissible as a record of public interactions. Judge Chen was leaning forward now, interested despite herself. The footage played on a courtroom screen. There was Patricia showing up unannounced. There was Patricia raising her voice at my front door. There was Patricia photographing something on my porch. My stomach had dropped when I saw that in Mr. Chen's files. There was Patricia leaving, her body language aggressive, her posture rigid with anger. And then there was other footage. Footage of me on my porch with Sophie, both of us laughing. Me helping Lucas navigate the front steps. Me standing in my driveway, alive and present and completely, undeniably fine. Mr. Chen, Jennifer said, in your professional judgment as an educator, have you observed this woman's parenting to be concerning? No, Mr. Chen said firmly. Quite the opposite. I've observed her to be patient, attentive, and deeply loving toward her children. She is a good mother. The courtroom was silent. Patricia's lawyer tried to salvage the case. She questioned whether surveillance footage proved anything, whether a neighbor's testimony was reliable, whether the text messages were taken out of context. But Judge Chen had seen enough. This petition is denied, Judge Chen said, removing her glasses. Petitioner's request for emergency protective custody is unfounded. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented regarding a pattern of harassment and unsubstantiated allegations, I'm issuing a preliminary restraining order. Ms. Summers, you are to have no contact with the respondent or the minor children without court-ordered supervision, pending a full hearing in 60 days. If you attempt to contact CPS with future allegations, you will be liable for filing a false report, which carries penalties including fines. She looked directly at Patricia. Grief is not an excuse for this behavior, Ms. Summers. Neither is family loyalty. What I see here is a woman trying to take custody of children not out of genuine concern, but out of unresolved loss and spite. My mother's hand squeezed mine so hard I thought my bones might break. I couldn't cry, not here, not yet. I just sat very still, afraid that any movement would shatter the fragile reality of having one. As we filed out of the courtroom, Patricia didn't look at me. She just gathered her things with shaking hands while her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Outside the courthouse, in the bright afternoon sunlight, Mr. Chin approached me hesitantly. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know the surveillance was. I hugged him. This man who'd violated my privacy to protect my children. This man who documented my life without permission because he believed I needed saving. This man who'd been right. Thank you, I said. Thank you for seeing me. My mother was crying. Jennifer was already on her phone, calling the CPS investigator with the good news. But I just stood there, breathing the free air, thinking about Michael and about how sometimes the most unexpected people become our guardian angels. My children were safe. And I was finally going to be able to grieve.